She left me in a cheap hotel room with peeling wallpaper and said, "You'll be fine, Mom. Just stay here for one night." Then she took my purse, claiming it was safer with her. She promised she'd be back in the morning. But morning turned into night, and that night turned into 3 long hungry days. I sat on the edge of that stiff mattress, staring at the door like a dog waiting for its owner. No money. No phone. Just shame. My own daughter left me stranded like trash. And a week later, she came begging at my door. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. I didn't raise her to be that way. I still remember the day I brought her home from the hospital. Her tiny fist wrapped around my pinky, her face so serious even as a newborn. As if she already had something important to say. I named her Abigail after my grandmother, a woman of strength and grace. Back then I had nothing but a 2-bedroom apartment, a beat-up Ford, and a hole in my heart from losing my husband. But the moment I held Abigail, I knew I had everything I needed. Her father, James, died when she was 5. He was driving home from the late shift at the mill when a drunk driver clipped his car on the rainy curve near Route 17. He never had a chance. The police told me gently, but nothing can prepare you for that kind of knock. One minute you're folding laundry. The next your world collapses. I didn't have the luxury to fall apart. Not with a little girl staring up at me with her daddy's eyes. I worked the front desk at a dentist's office during the day, then cleaned offices at night. I'd come home sore, my fingers aching, but the moment Abigail would run to me with her arms wide open shouting, "Mommy!" I'd forget every bit of pain. We didn't have much, but I made sure she had everything she needed. New school shoes, birthday cakes baked from scratch, Halloween costumes hand-sewn with love. She wanted to be a sunflower one year. So I stayed up all night stitching yellow felt petals to a headband. We were close, closer than most, I think. She'd crawl into my bed when thunderstorms rolled in, and I'd hum the same lullaby my mother once sang to me. In high school, she'd tell me about her crushes, her fears, her dreams. I was her mother, yes, but I was also her safe place. I took pride in that. When she got accepted to college on scholarship no less, I cried for 2 days. Not because she was leaving, but because she'd made it. She worked so hard and I worked so hard for her. We sat on her dorm bed that first night, eating fast food and laughing, pretending we weren't both scared to death. I left her with a quilt I'd made from all her baby clothes and told her, "No matter where you go, this is home." And when she started dating Rob, I welcomed him. He was polite at first. Handsome, ambitious, a little too polished maybe, but Abigail glowed around him. She brought him home for Thanksgiving, and I made my famous sweet potato casserole. He ate one bite and said it was a bit too old-fashioned. I laughed it off. I thought he just needed time to warm up. When they got married, I sat in the front row in a dress I couldn't really afford, clutching a bouquet with shaking hands. She looked radiant, and when she walked down that aisle, she winked at me. I held on to that moment for years. After the wedding, they moved to the city and the phone calls got shorter. I told myself it was just life, new routines, long commutes. She had a career now, a husband, responsibilities. I didn't want to be the kind of mother who clings or guilts. I waited for her to call. Sometimes she did. Sometimes weeks passed. But whenever she came home for the holidays, she still hugged me tightly and called me Mama, in that soft voice that reminded me of her childhood. She still asked me to make the ginger cookies she loved. And I did, always from scratch, always with love. I clung to those moments because they reminded me of who we used to be. I believed that no matter how far she drifted, the bond between us was too deep to sever. A mother's love doesn't vanish just because her child stops calling. It waits. It hopes. Forgives. Looking back, maybe I forgave too much. Still, I can't rewrite those early years. And truthfully, I wouldn't want to. They were the best of my life. I gave Abigail my youth, my energy, my everything. And I did it gladly. That's what love is. You pour and pour until the cup is full. What I didn't realize was that she had stopped pouring back. It was little things at first. Subtle shifts like the way Abigail would talk over me during conversations or how she'd roll her eyes when I gave her advice. "That's not how things work anymore, Mom," she'd say, with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. I'd laugh it off, tell myself she was just adjusting to her new life. After all, marriage changes people. Priorities shift. It's normal. But there was something colder in her tone. something that hadn't been there before Rob came along. One Thanksgiving, I arrived at their apartment with a homemade pie and a bag of fresh cranberries. Abigail always preferred fresh to canned. I was dressed nicely, hair done, excited to spend the holiday together. Rob opened the door, looked me up and down and said, "Oh, you're early." I wasn't. I was right on time. Abigail didn't even greet me with a hug. Just a distracted wave from the kitchen while she was on the phone. That dinner was the first time I felt like an outsider in my daughter's home. They'd switched to modern furniture, sleek, cold, all sharp edges and metal. No room for the warmth of family pictures or my embroidered pillows. I tried to compliment the decor, but Rob laughed and said, "Yeah, we finally got rid of the granny stuff." Abigail didn't correct him. Didn't even glance at me. I sat through that meal pretending everything was fine. Even as Rob mocked the way I mashed potatoes and Abigail giggled. I told myself it was harmless. Maybe he was just trying to be funny. Maybe she was just tired. Maybe. That's the thing about love, it makes you excuse too much. Soon visits became shorter. I'd come for a weekend, but by Saturday afternoon, Rob would invent a last-minute dinner plan or a just the two of us movie night. Abigail would say, "You don't mind, right, Mom?" Of course I minded. But I always smiled and said, "Of course not, sweetheart. You too enjoy." She stopped asking me for advice too. When her car broke down, I offered to help look into a mechanic I trusted. She replied, "Rob's got it. He doesn't really want me taking suggestions from people who don't understand newer cars." People meant me. One day I offered to come help around the apartment, do laundry, cook a few meals for the week the way I used to. She looked uncomfortable and said, "Actually, we have a cleaner now. And Rob prefers if things are done a certain way. You wouldn't really know where things go." It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Like I didn't belong in her world anymore. At Christmas that year, I gave her a handmade quilt I'd been working on for 6 months. It had patches from her childhood dresses, her baby blanket, even an old t-shirt from her high school track team. I thought it would mean something. She opened it, smiled politely and said, "Oh, thanks, Mom. That's sweet." Then she folded it neatly and placed it back in the box. No hug, no emotion, no mention of the time I must have spent on it. I noticed how Rob started making more and more decisions for the both of them. He controlled the restaurant choices, the conversation topics, even what shows they watched. Abigail seemed fine with it, comfortable even, like she'd handed over the wheel of her life. And the distance between us widened. I began noticing my calls went to voicemail more often. She'd text back with things like, "Crazy day, we'll call later." But later never came. When I finally brought it up, she said, "Mom, you call at weird times. Rob says I need to set better boundaries." Boundaries. A word she never used growing up. Now it was her shield. I started doubting myself. Maybe I was calling too much. Maybe I was hovering. Maybe I was just a lonely old woman with too many memories and not enough distractions. But one day, something inside me shifted. I had mailed her a birthday card with a small check, just $50 and a handwritten note, the kind she used to keep in a shoebox under her bed. A week later I got a text. "Thanks for the card. You didn't have to send money though. Rob says it's kind of awkward." Awkward. Love apparently was awkward now. That's when the unease started. A quiet hum in my chest that wouldn't go away. It told me something was changing, and not for the better. Rob had a way of speaking about me that made me feel like a burden. "Your mom's still driving? That's risky," he said once. Abigail nodded. "Yeah, I've been thinking she should maybe downsize and look into assisted living." I was 68. I still walked every morning, cooked all my meals, even volunteered at the library twice a week. Assisted living? I was insulted. But more than that, I was afraid. Afraid of what they might be planning. I tried to tell myself they meant well, that they were just worried. But late at night, lying in bed, I'd remember the little glances between them, the dismissive tones, the way Abigail no longer looked me in the eye. That feeling, that deep gut-wrenching sense that something was being taken from me, it started growing. And I had no idea just how far it would go. It was a Sunday afternoon in early spring. The kind where the air still had a bite, but the sun warmed your back just enough to give you hope. Abigail had invited me to lunch at a little bistro downtown, a place she said served clean modern food. I dressed up, pearls, my navy blouse, The one with little roses embroidered at the collar. I even wore heels, though my bunions would protest for days. She arrived late, barely hugged me, already distracted by her phone. I tried not to let it sting. Maybe she had a lot on her mind. Maybe she didn't mean anything by it. We sat down. She ordered a salad she barely touched. I got tomato soup. It was watery and cold, but I didn't complain. I was just happy to be with her, to talk, to connect. But she wasn't really there. Her eyes kept flitting back to her phone, thumbs tapping away under the table. Finally she sighed, set the phone down and said, "Mom, we need to talk." I froze. Those words never come with good news. She folded her hands in that way she did when she was nervous as a little girl. I thought maybe something was wrong. Maybe Rob had lost his job, maybe they were moving again. But it wasn't that. "I've been looking at places for you. Just, to plan ahead. Retirement communities. There's one not far from us. It has on-site care, transportation, even a salon. I think it'd be a good fit." My spoon clattered against the bowl. "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She gave a weak smile like she was doing me a favor. "Mom, it's just time. You're alone in that old house. You're getting older and Rob thinks." "Rob thinks?" I interrupted. "What about what you think, Abigail?" She looked away. "We just want what's best for you. It's safer. And honestly, you're starting to forget things." I blinked. "Forget things? Like what?" She shrugged. "You called me 3 times last week asking what day it was. I was confirming your birthday plans." I snapped. "Not because I forgot, but because you kept changing them." People at nearby tables glanced over. Abigail's cheeks flushed and she leaned in. "See, this is exactly the kind of outburst I was afraid of," she said quietly. "You're stressed, and you don't realize how much you're struggling. That's why we've already submitted an application. Just to get the process started." My mouth went dry. "We?" She didn't answer. That's when I realized. She wasn't asking me. She was telling me. "I'm not moving," I said firmly. "And certainly not to some place you picked behind my back." She gave a small tired sigh like I was being difficult. "We're not doing this to hurt you. It's for your own good." "For my good?" I repeated. "You haven't been to my house in 4 months. You don't return my calls. And now you want to shove me somewhere like a suitcase you don't want to unpack." "Mom, stop," she hissed, glancing around. "You're making a scene." I stood up slowly, feeling my knees tremble. Not from age, but from humiliation. "No, Abigail. You made the scene the moment you decided I was no longer worth your time." I left without finishing my soup. She didn't follow. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and cried harder than I had in years. The kind of crying that comes from deep inside, ripping, shaking, helpless sobs. I wasn't crying just for what she said. I was crying for every birthday party, every late-night story, every Christmas Eve I stayed up to wrap her presents, for every hour I worked when I could have been resting, for every sacrifice I made thinking it was building something strong and permanent. But that foundation, it had cracked. And I'd been too proud, too hopeful to see it. The next day, I called my sister-in-law Ruth. She was the only person who might understand. "She wants to put me in a facility," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Ruth gasped. "But you're still running circles around half the women in my choir group." I tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. Then came the real blow. Ruth hesitated. "Sweetheart, I don't want to stir the pot, but at the church bake sale last month, Rob mentioned something about prepping the house for rental income. Said it wouldn't be long." I sat in silence. They were planning this for months. My home, the one James and I bought together, the one I raised Abigail in, was already being eyed like a profit opportunity. And the worst part? My daughter hadn't said a word. The betrayal wasn't just in the suggestion that I couldn't live on my own. It was in the silence, the secrecy. The way she'd let Rob take the wheel, as if I were no longer someone with value or choice. After that, I stopped calling. Stopped offering help. Stopped sending "just thinking of you" cards. I withdrew quietly like a tide going out. And no one noticed. Or if they did, they said nothing. My daughter, the child I once nursed through chickenpox and heartbreaks, now saw me as an inconvenience. A burden to be managed. It was a slow erosion of trust, but in that bistro it collapsed all at once. Something broke that day. Not just in me but between us. And it would never be quite the same again. I should have trusted my instincts that day at the bistro, but I still wanted to believe the best of her. I spent the next week replaying her words, trying to find the line between concern and control. Maybe she really did worry about me. Maybe Rob had convinced her I was slipping when I wasn't. Maybe they weren't trying to hurt me. They just didn't know how to love me properly anymore. That's the kind of lie mothers tell themselves. But then came the weekend trip, the one she called a little mother-daughter getaway. She said she wanted to reconnect. Just the two of us. A reset. I wanted to believe her. She picked me up on a Saturday morning, smiling like nothing had ever happened. I thought it'd be nice to have some beach air, she said. You've been cooped up too long. It was a 2-hour drive to the coast. She chatted the whole way, surface-level things. Weather. Traffic. How expensive groceries had gotten. Not a word about our argument. I just listened, trying not to look too eager, too desperate for her attention. When we pulled up to the motel, my heart sank. It wasn't the charming seaside inn she described. It was one of those tired, low-budget places with doors that opened straight onto the parking lot. Faded paint, dusty windows, flickering neon sign that simply read, vacancy. I know it's not fancy, she said quickly, as if she'd read my face. Everything else was booked. Inside, the room smelled like mildew and cheap air freshener. The wallpaper peeled at the corners, and the carpet had old stains that I didn't want to think about. Still, I told myself it's not about the room, it's about the time together. But as soon as I set my purse down, she checked her phone and said, "Listen, I have to run to a meeting. Work stuff. I'll be back in the morning." I blinked. A meeting? On a Saturday? She hesitated. Yeah, one of Rob's new business contacts. He wants me to help with some investor pitch. I thought this was our weekend. It is. I just have to take care of this one thing. You'll be fine, right? I started to ask for my phone. She'd taken it from the cup holder for safekeeping, she'd said earlier. But before I could speak, she leaned in, kissed my cheek and said, "Get some rest. Order room service if you want." And just like that, she was gone. I sat there, stunned, the door still swinging shut behind her. I didn't have my phone. I didn't have my purse. Not even a room key. She'd kept it so it wouldn't get lost. The room had no room service. No front desk after 5 p.m. Just a vending machine outside and a flickering hallway light. At first, I believed she'd be back by morning. But the morning came and went. So did the second day. I had to knock on the manager's office just to get a cup of coffee and explain my situation. He looked skeptical. I looked pathetic. By the third day I knew. She had no intention of coming back. I borrowed the front desk phone and called her number. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Again. I left a message, then another. "Abigail, please call me. I don't understand. I don't have anything here." Still nothing. I didn't have any money. Not even enough change for the vending machine. I went without food for a full day, drinking water from the bathroom sink. I slept in my clothes with a chair shoved under the door handle. Humiliation doesn't even begin to describe it. On the fourth day, I called my neighbor Gloria. Thank God for her. She wired me money through the motel office, enough for a cab ride back home. I remember sitting in that back seat, staring out at the blurred trees, my stomach empty, my chest hollow. I didn't even cry. I just felt finished. When I got home, everything looked different. Smaller. Emptier. Like it no longer belonged to me. I took a shower, ate toast, and went straight to my bedroom closet. There, tucked behind an old shoebox, was the envelope I hadn't looked at in years, my will. I took it out, laid it flat on the table and just stared at it. Then something caught my eye. A yellow post-it note stuck inside the front flap. Not mine. In Abigail's handwriting. It read, "Call Mr. Knowles. Start the transfer paperwork once she signs. Don't mention the equity clause unless she asks." My heart dropped into my stomach. Mr. Knowles. I remembered that name from a Christmas card. Rob's old college friend. He worked in real estate now. The will. Transfer paperwork. They weren't just thinking about putting me in a facility. They were planning to take the house. My house. I spent that night in silence, going over every conversation, every polite deflection, every awkward smile. I thought of all the times Abigail said she was just trying to help, and realized she'd never been helping. She was managing me, maneuvering me, and I, like a fool, had let her. No more. That was the night something inside me hardened. Not into hate but into resolve. I wasn't going to yell or scream or beg. I was going to watch, listen, and wait, because now I saw them clearly. And I knew they saw me as a stepping stone. But I still had a few stones left to throw. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. I didn't sleep much after that night. Something shifted inside me. Not just anger, but a kind of quiet alertness. I was done being passive. Done excusing every slight and pretending things would go back to how they were. Because they wouldn't. My daughter and her husband had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let them keep walking all over me. The next morning I called Abigail. She answered on the second ring. "Mom," she said, her voice flat. "Are you okay? Do you care?" I asked calmly. She sighed. "Don't start. I told you it was just a misunderstanding. You left me at a motel with no money. That's not a misunderstanding. That's abandonment." There was a pause, then. "You're exaggerating. I didn't abandon you. I told you I had a meeting." "Don't lie to me, Abigail," I cut in. "You took my phone and my purse and disappeared. You never called. You left me like I was nothing." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Mom, you've been acting confused lately. Rob and I thought some time alone might help you realize how much you've been depending on us." "Depending?" I laughed bitterly. "The only thing I've depended on you for lately is basic decency, and even that was too much." Her voice hardened. "This isn't helping. I called to talk, not to be attacked." "You didn't call." "I did. Because that's how it's always been. I reach out. I forgive. I look the other way while you and your husband make plans behind mine." That's when she slipped. She muttered under her breath, probably not realizing I'd still hear it. If she'd just signed the house over, none of this would be necessary. There it was. The truth. "What did you just say?" I asked. "Nothing." "Abigail." Silence. I could hear her breathing. "I saw the note," I said finally. "The one about Mr. Knowles and the equity clause. You were never trying to help me. You were trying to take everything I have." She hung up. Just like that. I sat with the silence, stunned. And then slowly I stood up, walked to the kitchen, poured myself a cup of tea, and sat at the table with my planner. I flipped to a blank page and wrote in big letters, "Protect what's mine." The next day I stopped by the church office. Pastor Elaine greeted me with a hug. The warm kind you don't know you need until you receive it. "You all right, Marjorie?" she asked, tilting her head gently. I almost said yes. But then I shook my head and whispered, "No, but I will be." She poured me a cup of coffee and sat across from me. "I think my daughter is trying to take my house," I told her. "And I think I've let it go on too long." Pastor Elaine didn't look surprised. Just saddened. "You've always given, Marjorie. Maybe it's time you protect your boundaries too." Later that afternoon I walked to the bakery. Mrs. Lynn, the owner, had known me for years. She gave me an extra scone and said, "You look tired. Is Abigail okay?" I blinked. "Why do you ask?" "She came by last week," she said, "asking what the property taxes are like around here. Said you were thinking of selling." I just nodded. My throat burned. That night I wrote everything down. Dates, comments, signs. I created a paper trail. The next few days I started moving with quiet determination. I contacted a lawyer recommended by Pastor Elaine, a kind woman named Judith who had silver hair, a direct gaze, and no tolerance for nonsense. We went through every document, my will, house deed, financial accounts. "You have more power than you think," she said. I started documenting every interaction with Abigail and Rob, every phone call, every message. I printed copies, kept a folder under my bed and a second copy at Judith's office. For the first time in months I felt in control. I wasn't afraid of confrontation anymore. One morning I was outside watering my garden when my neighbor Tom walked by. He paused, gave me a look and said, "You doing okay, Marjorie? I saw Abigail last week. She seemed in a real hurry, going through your mail slot like she owned the place." I raised my eyebrows. "She what?" He nodded. "Just thought it was odd." I thanked him and checked my mailbox. Sure enough, 2 letters were missing from where I usually kept them. Bank statements. One from the county assessor. They were getting bolder. But so was I. I called Abigail that evening. Left a message this time. "You've taken enough," I said into the recorder. "And from now on you'll be dealing with my lawyer, Judith Haynes. She knows everything. This conversation is being documented. Do not come near my house again without my permission." I didn't get a response. But 2 hours later my front porch camera captured Rob standing on the sidewalk, looking up at the house. Just looking. He didn't approach. Didn't knock. Just stood there with his hands in his pockets. Then he walked away. I watched the footage 3 times. And I felt nothing but a steady, quiet sense of control. I wasn't scared of them anymore. I was done being the one who got left behind. Walking into Judith Haynes' office was like stepping into a space built for clarity. No frills. Just soft lighting, neat files, and a pot of tea already steeping on the side table. She greeted me with a firm handshake. Not one of those limp, distracted ones. She looked me in the eye. "I've reviewed everything you sent, Marjorie," she said. "You're not wrong to feel what you're feeling." That was the first time someone validated it out loud. Not just my actions but my emotions. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to ruin Abigail. I just wanted peace. And safety. And dignity. None of which she'd shown me in the past year. We sat down and began discussing the will. My original will, written shortly after James died, left everything to Abigail. The house, the savings, even my modest collection of antique china that had belonged to my mother. I never questioned that choice. She was my only child. My whole life I thought of her as my legacy. But legacies don't always return the favor. "I want it changed," I told Judith. "Everything." She nodded, already clicking her pen. "First," I said, "remove Abigail as the sole beneficiary. Do you want to name someone else?" she asked. I paused. "Yes," I said slowly. "I want to divide it. Half to a charity, one that helps women like me. Older women. The ones who get left behind or pushed aside. The rest I want in a trust. If Abigail tries to contest it, it all goes to the charity." Judith looked impressed. "A no-contest clause," she said. "Smart. That'll hold up. I also want to assign power of attorney to someone else," I added. "Not her. Never again." We walked through the paperwork step by step. It felt surreal scribbling out my daughter's name, crossing out years of belief and sacrifice with the stroke of a pen. I thought I'd cry. But I didn't. I felt steady, focused. When we got to the final page, Judith slid the document across the desk. "You sure about this?" she asked. I looked at the signature line. Then I remembered the motel. The smell of mold. My empty stomach. The feeling of being disposable. And I picked up the pen. "I've never been more sure," I said, and I signed. Afterward, Judith gave me copies and scanned everything into a secure server. "You're protected now," she said. "If they try anything, I'll be the first call you make." I walked out of that office carrying more than just documents. I carried control. For the first time in a long time, my life belonged to me again. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, a mug of tea in hand, and looked around the house. The same walls I'd painted with James. The kitchen where Abigail used to bake cookies with me, covered in flour and giggles. The garden out back he planted with his own hands before the accident. It was more than property. It was memory. It was mine. And they weren't going to take it. I took out an old note card and wrote a letter. Just a few lines. It would be stored with the will. "Abigail, I loved you more than anything in this world. But love is not a blank check. Love is not blindness. I'm sorry it came to this. I hope one day you'll understand, and maybe even forgive me. But I can't leave behind a legacy of silence. Mom." The next morning, I visited the local women's shelter. The one Pastor Elaine had told me about. I met the director, a kind woman named Maria. She showed me around the small, overburdened space. Tiny bedrooms filled with secondhand blankets, shelves stacked with canned food, a community kitchen buzzing with weary women and quiet children. "If we had more space, we could help twice as many," she said. I asked her to sit down. "I'm not rich," I said, "but I own my home outright. I'd like to leave it to this place. Or at least make sure it goes to something that actually helps people." Maria looked stunned. Are you serious? I nodded. I've spent too long giving to people who see me as a burden. I want what I leave behind to do something good. We exchanged contact information. I told her I'd talk to my lawyer. As I walked home, the air felt different, cooler but lighter. Like something had lifted off my chest. I hadn't just rewritten my will. I'd redrawn the entire outline of my future. Abigail didn't know it yet. But the world she thought she controlled, my house, my money, my decisions, it was no longer hers to manipulate. And the next time she tried, she'd realize just how much I'd changed. It happened a week later. I was sweeping the front porch when I saw a white envelope sticking halfway out of my mailbox. No stamp, no return address, just my name, handwritten in Abigail's elegant cursive. My stomach sank before I even opened it. Inside was a typed letter. No greeting. No warmth. It read, "Per our discussions and out of concern for your safety, Rob and I have spoken with the case manager regarding transitional housing and elder services. We believe it would be in everyone's best interest for you to begin the process of relocation. If you are unwilling to cooperate, we will pursue legal options for guardianship and the reassignment of your estate, which we believe to be in jeopardy due to cognitive decline and emotional instability. This is not a threat but a necessary step. Please do not make this harder than it needs to be." It was signed simply Abigail. No love. No mom. Just her name. Cold. Detached. I sat on the porch bench and stared at the letter, hands trembling. Not from fear but from fury. That was it. That was the final straw. They weren't just scheming behind my back anymore. They were putting it on paper. They wanted to declare me unfit. They wanted to steal my autonomy. I folded the letter neatly, walked inside, and placed it directly into my lawyer's folder. Then I picked up the phone and called Judith. "They're coming for legal control," I told her. She didn't sound surprised. "Let them try. We're ready." That night I didn't sleep. My mind raced not with panic but with planning. I pulled out every document I had, every receipt, every old doctor's note that confirmed my sound mental health. I even printed emails, times I'd paid for Abigail's car repairs, helped with her rent, bought her groceries. I built my own defense. Quietly. Meticulously. The next day I began packing. Not because I was leaving but because I was preparing. I gathered every important document, deed, will, bank records, and stored them in a fireproof box. I labeled everything. I even created a contact list of people who knew my condition, doctors, neighbors, Pastor Elaine, anyone who could vouch for my independence. And then I waited. It didn't take long. 3 days later, I saw Abigail's car pull into my driveway. Rob was in the passenger seat. I didn't bother to open the door. I watched through the window as they stepped out, dressed like they were going to court, black coats, sunglasses, serious faces. They rang the bell. Knocked. Then Rob pulled out a key. My breath caught. They had a key. Of course they did. I'd given Abigail a spare years ago, back when trust still lived in this house. The lock clicked. That's when I stepped out from the hallway. "I changed the locks 2 days ago," I said calmly. "You won't get in." Abigail froze. "Mom, what are you doing?" "What you're doing is called attempted trespassing," I replied. "And if you take one more step, I'll call the police." Rob raised his eyebrows. "You're being unreasonable. And you're not welcome here," I said. "Neither of you." Abigail's voice trembled. "We're trying to help you." "No. You're trying to control me." Rob laughed, condescending. "You're clearly not thinking clearly." I reached into my cardigan and pulled out my phone. I'd already hit record before I stepped into view. "I've documented everything," I said. "The letter. Your voicemail. Your previous attempts to enter the property. And I've filed a statement with my attorney. If you pursue guardianship, you'll be met with full legal resistance. I have my doctor's clearance. And I've appointed someone I trust with power of attorney." They both looked stunned. I stepped forward. "You thought I'd roll over and let you take my life apart. But you forgot who raised you, Abigail. You forgot who survived losing her husband and still managed to raise a daughter on 2 jobs and burnt coffee. You forgot who kept the lights on and the rent paid while you were out chasing college dreams." Her eyes welled with tears. I didn't flinch. "I'm not your stepping stone. I'm not a burden. I am your mother. And you may not love me anymore, but you will respect me. Rob muttered something under his breath, but Abigail said nothing. They turned and left without another word. I didn't watch them go. I stood there until the car disappeared down the street. Then I walked back inside, locked the door and sat in the living room in silence. I thought I might cry, but I didn't. I thought I might feel empty, but I didn't. I felt clean. Stripped of illusions, yes, but stronger than I'd felt in years. That night I made myself a proper meal: roast chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes. I lit a candle at the table. I sat alone, but I didn't feel lonely, because that night, for the first time in my life, I had finally chosen me. And that choice would echo louder than any letter Abigail ever wrote. It was Lily's graduation party. My granddaughter. She was turning 18, fresh out of high school, heading to university in the fall. Abigail had sent me an invitation, texted it, as if that erased everything that had happened. No apology, no explanation. Just, Lily would really love if you came. It's important to her. Not to Abigail. Not to Rob. But to Lily. And I loved that girl. She was the last thread tying me to anything good in that family. So I went. I wore my Sunday best, a long navy dress with the brooch James gave me on our 10th anniversary. I did my hair, applied lipstick and arrived exactly on time. Let them see I still stood tall. The party was held in the backyard of their home: white tents, string lights, catered appetizers. The kind of event they used to say was too fussy when I suggested doing something similar years ago. When I walked through the side gate, people turned. Some smiled hesitantly. Others looked surprised. Abigail was standing by the buffet table, chatting with a group of parents. When she saw me, her mouth dropped open slightly, just enough for me to see the fear behind her glossed-over expression. Rob was across the yard. His posture stiffened immediately. But Lily? Lily ran up to me like she was 6 years old again. "Grandma!" she cried, wrapping her arms around me so tight I almost lost my breath. "I didn't think you'd come." "For you? Always," I whispered. She pulled back, eyes shining. "Thank you." I kissed her forehead. "Let's get you your gift later. Right now, go enjoy your party." She beamed and skipped off. That's when Abigail approached. Her smile was forced. Her voice lowered so only I could hear. "You shouldn't have come." I smiled sweetly. "And miss my granddaughter's big day? You're trying to cause a scene." "No," I said calmly. "But I will correct the record if anyone asks." She paled. I pulled a folded sheet from my purse, the letter. Her letter, the one where she threatened to pursue guardianship. I held it just out of her reach. "I'm keeping this," I said. "And I've made copies. In case you decide to start lying." She hissed. "Put that away." Rob appeared beside her like a shadow. "What exactly do you want, Marjorie?" "To speak the truth," I said. "Since no one here knows what you did." People nearby were starting to notice. I looked at Abigail. "You tried to have me declared incompetent so you could take my home. You left me stranded in a motel with no phone, no money. You forged plans to transfer my house to your real estate buddy. And when I stood up for myself, you acted like I was the villain." Gasps. Murmurs. Someone dropped a drink. "I have documentation. Letters. Recordings. Witnesses," I continued. "If any of you want to know the truth about Abigail and Rob, I'll be over by the picnic table. You're welcome to ask." I turned and walked away. No one stopped me. In fact, a few followed. 2 mothers I recognized from Lily's school came to sit with me. One of them whispered, "I always thought something felt off about them." Another said, "You're very brave." Lily came back with a paper plate of fruit and sat beside me, confused. "Mom's crying," she said. "She might be," I replied gently. "But sometimes tears come when the truth finally hits." Rob disappeared after that. Abigail tried to hold it together, but more and more guests slipped away early. Lily leaned in. "What happened between you two?" I looked her in the eyes. "Sometimes," I said, "the people we love most forget how to love us back. And when that happens, we have 2 choices. Stay quiet and let them keep hurting us, or speak up and protect ourselves." She nodded slowly. "Are you okay?" she asked. I smiled. "I am now." By the end of the party, only a handful of people remained. Abigail avoided me. She didn't say goodbye. Lily walked me to the car, hugged me hard and whispered, "Thank you. For being honest. For being here." As I drove home, the setting sun spilled gold across the road. I felt light, like something old and heavy had finally been lifted from my shoulders. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't raise my voice. But I told the truth. And that was enough. Do you think the mother made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The days after the party were quiet. Almost eerily so. Not a single word from Abigail. Not a text. Not a call. Not even one of those cold, emotionless emails she'd started sending in recent years. Rob, of course, disappeared entirely. He was always the kind of man who ran when the curtain dropped and the stage lights went cold. The silence didn't feel victorious. Felt still. I sat on my porch most mornings, sipping weak coffee and listening to the birds squabble in the hedges. The world kept turning. The neighbors waved like nothing had changed. The mail still came, the sun still rose, and I still made my bed every morning like James used to like it, sheets tight, corners tucked. But something had changed. Inside me, there were moments I expected to cry. I'd sit on the edge of the bed, staring at an old photo of Abigail in pigtails, and wait for the tears to come. They didn't. Not out of coldness, just clarity. I had spent so long aching over who she used to be that I hadn't realized I'd already grieved that version of her years ago. Grief isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the absence of hope. Around town, people had begun to whisper. Not maliciously, just curiosity rippling through the usual places. At the grocery store, a clerk I'd known since she was a teenager gave me a tight smile and said, "Heard you stood up for yourself. Good for you." At church, Pastor Elaine squeezed my hand after Sunday service. "Truth can be a lonely companion," she said gently. "But it's always the right one." Even my old friend Carol, who rarely left her porch, stopped by with a tin of lemon bars and said, "Took guts what you did." I hope she wakes up one day and realizes what she lost. I nodded. But I didn't count on that day ever coming. And yet, amidst the silence, something unexpected bloomed. Peace came in small ways. A slow walk through the garden, feeling the sun on my face. Reorganizing the linen closet without rushing. Taking out my old sewing machine and fixing the hem of a dress I hadn't worn in years. Nothing grand. Just the quiet, sacred dignity of doing things on my time. Then one afternoon someone knocked on the door. I opened it to find Lily, standing there with a reusable grocery bag full of tea, scones, and a novel I'd once recommended to her. She looked nervous. "I thought we could read together," she said. "Or just sit." I stepped aside and let her in without a word. We didn't speak for the first 20 minutes. Just sipped our tea in the living room while the ceiling fan hummed above us. Then softly she said, "Mom's not speaking to me either." I looked at her surprised. "Why not?" I told her what she did to you was wrong. That I saw the letter. That she lied when she said it was all a misunderstanding. My throat tightened. She said I was being ungrateful. That I was taking sides. "You're not," I said. "You're just telling the truth." She nodded, biting her lip. "I don't know what to do with her anymore," she said. I reached over and took her hand. "You don't have to do anything, sweetheart. You just have to be you. That's all I ever wanted for either of you." Her eyes shimmered with tears, but she smiled. "Thanks, Grandma." We read together for an hour. Then she helped me put away the dishes and told me she'd come back next week. True to her word, she did. Lily became a fixture in my life, not out of obligation but choice. We cooked. We walked. She helped me update my old stereo so I could play James's favorite records. She asked me about the war, about how I met her grandfather, about what it was like raising a child alone. In her questions I saw genuine love. In her silence I saw respect. And in her presence I saw healing. Abigail's absence no longer felt like a hole. It felt like a boundary. One I needed to draw a long time ago. I didn't block her number. I didn't slam the door shut. But I also didn't chase her anymore. If she wanted to speak, she'd have to come honestly. Not through threats, not through paperwork. But with humility. With truth. And if she never came, well, then I still had my garden. My home. My peace. And Lily. Sometimes we don't get the family we dreamed of. But we find the people who choose us again and again. And that, I've learned, is more than enough. Started with a walk. Just me, my cane, and the winding path through the park I used to push Abigail's stroller along when she was still small enough to believe the world was kind. The summer breeze was soft that morning, the trees whispering secrets overhead as if they knew I was searching for something new. I'd been quiet for too long, not just from others, but from myself. My days had become calm, yes, but also routine. Tea, garden, Lily, repeat. But something in me stirred as I walked past the old community center. A group of women were gathered near the steps, holding flyers and coffee, laughing as they arranged tables and books. I paused, curious. One of them looked up and smiled. Need help, hon? I smiled back. Just being nosy. She laughed. You're welcome to join. We're running a storytelling workshop. Seniors sharing their life lessons with young women. It's free. Storytelling, I said aloud. The word landed somewhere deep inside me. After everything I'd endured, after all the silence and betrayal, my story had become sharper, more focused. I didn't want to keep it buried. I walked home with something buzzing in my chest. That evening, Lily came over with 2 boxes of old photos. Figured you could use help sorting these, she said, grinning. As we laid them out across the living room rug, something clicked. Photos of me and James dancing in the kitchen. Abigail at her 7th birthday party in a princess costume I'd sewn myself. Me standing beside my garden in rubber boots and a wide sun hat. Snapshots of a life that had been full, even when hard. You should do something with these, Lily said. Like what? Share them. Tell your story. People don't talk about women like you enough. I smiled. That night I didn't sleep much. Not from worry but excitement. The next day I called Judith. I want to start something, I told her. A space for women like me, older, wiser, maybe bruised a bit, but still alive, still with stories to tell. Judith chuckled. What are you thinking? I want to use my house, I said slowly. Not just live in it but give it purpose. Open it up. Host story circles, maybe workshops. Let it be a place where women find voice again. There was silence on the line. Then, Marjorie, that's beautiful. I spent the next 2 weeks planning. I cleared out the back parlor, James's old reading room, turned it into a cozy circle space with mismatched chairs, a rug from the attic, and a tea cart stocked with every kind of herbal bag you can imagine. Lily helped me make signs. Marjorie's Circle. Stories worth sharing. I spread the word at church. Told Pastor Elaine. Asked Mrs. Lynn to pin a flyer in her bakery window. I didn't expect much. But on that first Saturday, 7 women showed up. Some widowed. Some divorced. One was newly retired, trying to remember who she was outside of her career. We sat in a circle and drank tea, and I told them a piece of my story. Not the motel, not the legal threats, not yet. Just the parts about James raising Abigail and what it felt like to be needed and then discarded. One by one the others shared. There were tears. Laughter. Long aching silences. It was magic. Word spread quickly. By the 3rd meeting we had 12 women. Lily started recording the sessions, with permission of course, and we set up a little blog together. Marjorie's House, she called it. Funny how the same house Abigail once tried to take had become something entirely mine again. Not just a home but a haven. We hosted writing nights, recipe swaps, even a grief circle for women who'd lost children or grandchildren. People brought pies, stories, memories. Sometimes just their silence. All were welcome. And me? I felt purpose again. My days weren't about filling the hours. They were about living in them. Fully. Even the garden seemed to bloom brighter, as if it too had been waiting for this change. One morning Lily handed me a folder. What's this? I asked. A proposal. To register Marjorie's House as a nonprofit. We could apply for funding. Maybe hire a counselor. Get you help if it grows. I opened the folder, my hands trembling. You think it could be that big? She smiled. It already is. I hugged her tight. Thank you, Lily, for standing by me. You stood first, she whispered. The pain Abigail left me with hadn't vanished, but it no longer ruled my life. I'd built something new, something better. And I did it with the very thing she thought she'd broken, my voice. The house had never been so full. Full of footsteps, voices, laughter that came from the belly, not the throat. Full of the smells of cinnamon and chamomile and old paper. Full of people, not just women my age but younger ones too. College girls who'd grown up without mothers. Divorced women rediscovering their strength. A widow who hadn't spoken to anyone in years until she read one of our blog posts and showed up with a trembling hand on the doorbell. And somehow they found something here, something we all needed. One Tuesday afternoon, I walked into the kitchen and found Lily baking muffins with Esther, a retired nurse who'd lost her daughter to cancer. They were laughing about how neither of them could remember where the baking soda had gone, and I stood there just listening, letting the warmth of the moment settle deep into my bones. This was what a home was supposed to feel like. Not cold silence. Not tension. Not fear of saying the wrong thing. It didn't matter that we didn't share blood. We shared truth. We showed up for each other. We let each other speak. And when someone cried, we passed the tissues and waited, no rush, no judgment. That's family if you ask me. The parlor became our circle room. The dining room? Now a long table with mismatched chairs for journaling sessions and potluck dinners. The guest room? A quiet space for women who needed a night away from a life that was breaking them. Even the neighbors joined in. Tom, the man next door, offered to mow the lawn every week. "Consider it my donation," he said with a wink. Mrs. Lynn brought pastries every Friday. And Pastor Elaine popped by regularly to lead meditations or just sit quietly in the sunroom. Abigail never came by. I didn't expect her to. She'd made her choice. But one day, while we were setting up for a poetry night, I noticed a car idling across the street. It was hers. She didn't get out. Just sat there for a while. Then drove off. I said nothing to anyone. Not because I didn't feel it, but because I no longer needed her presence to validate mine. My identity wasn't rooted in her approval anymore. I was not just a mother who had been left behind. I was a woman who had lived, learned, and rebuilt. And the house? It lived again, too. We held a tea ceremony for International Women's Day. 40 people showed up, neighbors, newcomers, even 2 journalists who'd read about our little project online. They asked me to speak. I stood at the front of the room, shaking a little but smiling. Lily held my hand for a moment, then let go so I could stand alone. I looked at the faces, some old, some young, some worn, some shining, and I said, "This house was built with love." Then it became quiet. Then it almost became someone else's. But I took it back. And in doing so, I took myself back too. We are not defined by who leaves us. We are defined by who we choose to become after. There was silence after I finished. Then a long, deep applause. Not the kind you get for performance, but the kind that says, "Thank you. I see you." After the event, Lily and I sat in the garden sipping tea. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I hope I grow up to be like you." I laughed softly. "You already are, darling. You already are." She pulled something from her pocket, a small silver locket. "I found this in your attic," she said. "It's yours." Inside was a photo of James and baby Abigail. I ran my thumb over it slowly. "Funny," I whispered. "Even the pieces of the past I thought I lost, they're still here. Just in different hands." She smiled. "That's what family is," she said. "The people who carry your pieces when you forget where you left them." That night I wrote a letter. Not to Abigail. To myself. You survived. You spoke. You stood. And now you live. Not in bitterness, but in full, vibrant truth. Your story matters. And so do you. I folded it, tucked it in my journal, and went to bed with the window open. The wind carried in the sound of laughter from the porch. My house was alive again. So was I. It was a rainy Thursday when Abigail finally came. The kind of rain that soaks into your bones, slow, steady, thoughtful. I was in the parlor, folding linens with Esther, when I heard the knock. Not the doorbell. Just a knock. Soft. Hesitant. I opened the door and there she was. Umbrella in one hand, plastic grocery bag in the other. No makeup. Hair pulled back into a messy bun. Eyes swollen, red-rimmed. It had been months since I'd seen her in person. She looked older. Tired. Like life had worn her down the way pain wears down the soles of a shoe. I didn't say anything. Neither did she. Just stood there on my doorstep. The rain dripping off the edge of her umbrella like tears. She wasn't ready to cry. "Can I come in?" she asked finally, voice small. I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, as if the house itself might reject her. I offered her a towel. She took it without a word. Esther saw her and quietly excused herself to the kitchen. Abigail looked around. It's different. It's alive, I said. She nodded. We sat at the dining table. I didn't offer tea. I didn't want to pretend this was a warm reunion. It wasn't. After a long silence, she spoke. Lily told me everything. I waited. She said you're helping people. That you turned the house into a nonprofit. That you have meetings, events, guests. Her voice cracked. She said people actually come here to feel safe. They do. She looked down at her hands. I came to apologize, she said. Not because I want anything. Not because I expect you to forgive me. Just because it's time I owned it. She took a deep breath. I left you in that motel because I was angry. Not at you. At myself. Rob was pressuring me. He said we needed to plan for our future and your house was the easiest option. And I let him convince me you'd be fine. That it wasn't abandonment. That you were just difficult. She blinked back tears. But that was a lie. I knew it. I just didn't want to face it. You were right. About all of it. And I'm so sorry. I didn't cry. I just looked at her. Really looked at her. And I saw the girl she used to be. The one who scraped her knees in the driveway and cried for me to kiss them better. The one who held my hand when James died. The one who made me a card for every Mother's Day until she met Rob. And I saw the woman she had become. Flawed. Wounded. Human. Thank you for saying it, I said. I don't expect anything more, she whispered. I paused. Good. Because you won't get anything more. Not today. She nodded quickly, lips trembling. I figured. But I will say this, I continued. You taught me something. All that pain you caused, it showed me who I really was. What I could survive. What I was capable of. I built something beautiful from the pieces you tried to scatter. She looked at me with such regret it almost hurt. Do you hate me? She asked. No, I said. But I don't trust you. I understand. Trust has to be earned, Abigail. Over time. With truth. And consistency. She nodded. We sat in silence again. Then she reached into the plastic bag and pulled out a small box. These are Grandma's recipe cards. I found them in storage. Thought maybe you'd want them. I took the box and opened it. Inside were the old index cards, stained and curled from years of use. My mother's handwriting. My own notes in the margins. Abigail's scribbles as a child. Little hearts and smiley faces drawn beside the lemon tart recipe. My throat tightened. I looked up. Thank you. I didn't know what else to bring. That's enough. She stood slowly. I'll go now. I followed her to the door. As she stepped back out into the rain, she paused and looked over her shoulder. Lily said she wants to volunteer more. Help with the writing nights. She's welcome anytime. She's proud of you, Abigail said quietly. So am I. Even if I don't know how to say it. I gave her a slow nod. Then start by living better. She nodded once, then walked down the steps, disappearing behind the gray curtain of rain. I closed the door, turned around and exhaled. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. Closure perhaps. Or the start of something new on my terms. I placed the recipe box on the counter and smiled at the memory of my mother pulling pies from the oven. Some things return. Not the same, but softened by time. Do you believe in second chances even after deep betrayal? Tell us below. The sun was shining the day we hung the sign. Marjorie's house, hand-carved, painted cream with bold green letters, mounted right above the front porch. Lily stood beside me, holding one end while Tom secured the bolts. A small crowd had gathered, friends, neighbors, members of our storytelling circle, even a few newcomers who'd found us online. We were having our official launch day. An open house, ribbon cutting, community potluck, and storytelling showcase. It was more than I ever imagined. I wore a soft yellow dress and James's watch, now old and worn but still ticking, like it knew this day was coming. Pastor Elaine gave a blessing on the steps. Let this house continue to be a place of truth, of healing, of chosen family, she said, her voice firm and kind. When she handed me the ribbon-cutting scissors, my hands trembled. Not from age. From gratitude. I looked at the people before me, Esther, who'd found her voice again after years of silence. Clara, who had escaped an emotionally abusive marriage and now volunteered twice a week. Samantha, a college student who said this place reminded her of the grandmother she never got to meet. And Lily, sweet, loyal Lily, who now co-ran the blog, helped lead events, and had taken up baking just like I used to. I cut the ribbon. The cheers weren't loud, but they were real. Inside, people mingled through the rooms that had once been so quiet. The dining room buzzed with conversation. The circle room hosted a poetry reading by 3 women in their 70s. The kitchen served coffee, muffins, and lemon bars made from my mother's recipe. Yes, one of the very cards Abigail had returned. Even the backyard was alive again. String lights twinkled, folding chairs lined up in rows, and under the maple tree, I saw a small group seated in a half-circle, reading aloud old letters and journal entries. There was laughter. There were tears. And more than anything, there was connection. I stood in the hallway, taking it all in. This house, once nearly taken from me by deceit and greed, was now a place where people came to be seen, heard, and held. And it wasn't just a house anymore. It was a legacy. Later that evening, after the last goodbye, after the last dish was washed, Lily and I sat on the porch. The sun was dipping low, casting a golden glow across the garden. The air smelled of soil, lavender, and stories still lingering in the walls. "Do you think Grandma would be proud of this?" she asked. I smiled. "I think she'd be proud of you." She blushed. "I still can't believe how far this has come." "I can," I said softly, "because the truth always has somewhere to go. Even when it's buried. Even when people try to silence it. If you protect it, it will grow." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "What about Mom?" I sighed. "I don't know. She might come back again. She might not. That's her road to walk. Not mine. Would you let her in again?" I was quiet for a long time. Then I said, "I'd let her speak. But the door only stays open if the truth walks in first." Lily nodded. "I'm glad you didn't give up," she whispered. I looked out over the garden James once planted. The soil we turned together. The same earth where I buried tears, disappointment, hope, and now healing. "I almost did," I admitted. But then I remembered who built this place. Who filled it with laughter. Who scraped together meals during the lean years and held a sick child through the night and painted the bedroom walls soft blue because it helped her daughter sleep. I turned to Lily. "No one takes that from me. Not even the people I love." She didn't say anything. Just took my hand and squeezed it. And in that moment I felt him. James. As if he were sitting right beside me. Not in some ghostly way. Just present. In the light. In the warmth. In the continuation of what we started. So I whispered to him, just loud enough for the stars to hear. "We're okay now." She hurt me, but I stood tall. And I told the truth. And I found family again. In people who chose to show up. The wind rustled the leaves. The house creaked softly, like it was settling into itself. And I smiled. Because this wasn't just my victory. It was ours.